Chosen one, listen closely. Something has been watching you, not to harm you, but to measure you. You've felt it, haven't you? The strange pressure in the room when you're alone. The sudden shift in the people around you. The quiet knowing that your life stopped being ordinary a long time ago. You are not living a random story. You are inside an operation, a spiritual investigation, a high-level evaluation designed for only a small number of souls in every generation. You have been moved, pushed, shaken, and redirected because forces older than history are analyzing you, tracking your instincts, recording your resilience, studying how your spirit reacts when no one explains what's happening. They are watching because you are one of the few capable of unlocking the next stage, one of the rare ones who can survive the 7-part test that determines destiny. And your exam has already begun. Chosen one, like this video, subscribe, and comment, "I am ready for a powerful surprise." 1. The archive of silent tests, the hidden exams in your everyday life. Chosen one. The first test began long before you realized you were being observed. It started quietly, with the kinds of challenges people mistake for bad luck. But nothing around you lately has been accidental. It has all been recorded inside the archive, an ancient monitoring protocol that tracks the behaviors of people who might be ready for elevation. The archive is not a building. It is a field, a subtle, invisible system woven through your days like a net catching details no one else notices. And recently, you triggered its attention without meaning to. You didn't see the signal. Most never do. It activates when a certain kind of strength appears in someone's spirit, a strength that cannot be taught, only exposed under pressure. That is when the tests begin, and your life, without warning, shifted into examination mode. You saw it in moments that didn't make sense. You felt it in situations that pressed against you from odd angles. You sensed that something was off, something in the atmosphere tightening, like invisible fingers adjusting your environment. The archive was studying you, not your achievements, not your image, not your public face. It studied the tiny moments, the ones most people ignore, the moment you kept moving, even when frustration burned your chest, the moment you chose patience when someone else chose carelessness, the moment disappointment tried to collapse you, and you stood up again before your mind even knew why. The archive caught it all, and that's why the pattern around you changed. Sudden setbacks appeared, not as punishments, but as calibration tools, each one placed precisely where it could reveal your natural response. Because the archive isn't interested in who you pretend to be. It's interested in who you are when life closes its fist around you. When people around you grew distant, the archive registered your reaction. It watched to see whether you would chase them out of fear or allow their absence to reveal a truth you were avoiding. When opportunities slipped away at the last second, it wasn't fate rejecting you. It was the archive applying compression, pressure, tension. Not to break you, but to observe the raw material you are made of when something you want is withheld. It needed to know, would you crumble? Would you lash out? Would you fall into despair? Or would you adapt, quietly, powerfully, without losing your inner direction? And there were moments when the archive didn't want your strength. It wanted your honesty, your vulnerability, your unfiltered reaction before you could mask it in logic. That's why the emotional waves hit you so unexpectedly. Some days heavy, some days sharp, some days completely unexplainable. Nothing was wrong with you. Something was being measured through you. Your inner storms generated data, spiritual data, showing how your core handles pressure when your world becomes unpredictable. And that dream you dismissed, the one that felt too strange or too vivid to be just a dream, that was not fiction from your subconscious. It was a dispatch, your first encrypted message from those monitoring your progress. A symbolic packet of information delivered through a softer dimension, because messages like these cannot be given through ordinary means. They wanted to see something in you, whether you'd ignore the call or feel the shift in your bones. Chosen one, the archive of silent tests is not trying to punish you. It is verifying you, verifying whether what lives inside you is stable enough, sharp enough, ancient enough to survive what comes after the seventh test. Because the breakthrough you are moving toward cannot be given to someone who collapses at the smallest disruption. It can only be unlocked by someone who demonstrates strength even in blindness, someone who advances even without clarity, because their spirit leads stronger than their fear. This is why your days have felt dense. This is why certain relationships have thinned. This is why your sense of direction both sharpened and blurred at the same time. You were not losing control. You were entering a controlled environment. The archive has been gathering every signal you've sent, every reaction you've had, every instinct that rose to the surface when things didn't go as planned. And now the system has enough data to confirm something remarkable. You are progressing. You may not feel like it. You may not see it. You may not have the proof you want. But your responses in moments of confusion have written your name deeper into the selection process. The archive has determined that your resilience is not accidental. Your strength is not temporary. Your intuition is not random. Your survival is not luck. You are showing markers of someone who has the potential to pass all 7 tests, and only a few ever reach that possibility. The archive has moved you into the next phase, the phase where your environment begins to shift in ways you will not be able to explain to people who are not being tested. You'll notice new patterns, new tension, new pressure lines, and new openings that appear at the exact moment your patience breaks. You have been identified. You have been marked for breakthrough. And the first test was only the beginning. 2. The Tribunal of Motives. The exam of what you're really made of, the Tribunal of Motives, does not arrive with thunder or declarations. It slips into your life quietly, like a shift in the temperature of the air. You don't see its members, but you feel their presence the way you feel someone watching you from behind a closed door. Their purpose is simple: to uncover what is buried beneath the surface of your behavior. They are not interested in the image you show the world. They are studying the part of you that only emerges when your emotions rise without warning. And lately, chosen one, they have been watching you with rare intensity, because something inside you has begun to change. They recorded the moment you held back the words you wanted to throw like knives. It wasn't just an act of restraint. It was a clear transmission of the state of your inner world, not your polished self, the real you, the one that appears before you have time to edit your reactions. When you swallowed that anger, the tribunal leaned closer. They examined the exact second your chest tightened, the flicker in your eyes, the way your jaw steadied before your mind caught up. They saw that you felt the pull of old reactions, yet you pressed against it. You interrupted your own instinct. That interruption sent a signal stronger than any speech. The tribunal studies moments like that because they reveal more truth than 1,000 promises. Anyone can claim to have a pure heart. Anyone can pretend to have outgrown their past. But the tribunal watches for the split-second decision, the moment emotion surges and you choose what to do with it. That choice is your fingerprint. It tells them who you are beneath performance, beneath fear, beneath habit. And recently, you've shown them something they did not expect. The beginnings of mastery. Not perfection, but mastery. The kind that grows out of pressure, pain, and quiet decisions no one else sees. That is why an old memory resurfaced when it did. It wasn't random, it wasn't a mistake, or a coincidence, or your mind acting up. The tribunal brought it forward deliberately, like lifting a sealed file from an ancient shelf. They wanted to see whether you would collapse into the same response you used years ago. The reflex you developed when you were younger, more wounded, less conscious of your strength. They watched to see if the memory would drag you back into its gravity, or if you would stand at the edge of it and realize you no longer belong to that version of yourself. When the memory came up, sudden, sharp, maybe even painful, they weren't looking at the memory at all. They were looking at your reaction to it. Did you tense? Did you freeze? Did you retreat into old self-blame? Did you replay the scene as if nothing had changed? Or did something inside you stay still, grounded, unshaken? The tribunal was silent as you confronted it. Silent, but fully engaged. They saw you breathe through a moment that once would have broken you. They saw you examine the hurt without falling back into its illusion. They saw you respond from the present instead of the past. And in that moment, the tribunal observed evidence of evolution. Quiet but undeniable. Then came the conversation you overheard, the one you brushed off as coincidence, as if you were simply in the wrong place at the right time. But nothing about it was accidental. The tribunal placed that moment on your path like a coded message. They wanted to see how you interpret stories when you are not the center of them. They wanted to observe how you read between the lines, how you listen to what is said and unsaid. The conversation itself was irrelevant. What mattered was how your mind worked while listening. Did you assume the worst? Did you assign meaning that wasn't yours to carry? Did you twist their tone into something personal? Or did you remain calm, observing without absorbing? The tribunal watched the way your eyes softened or sharpened, the way your breath changed, the way your thoughts shifted as fragments of someone else's truth reached your ears. They saw exactly how your spirit filters information, whether you look for understanding or for confirmation of your fears. That overheard moment revealed the architecture of your perception. It showed them whether you interpret life from wounds or from clarity. And then there was the moment you chose silence, when everything inside you was ready to defend itself. The tribunal paid close attention. Silence can be weakness when born from fear, but the silence they observed in you was different. It carried weight. It carried awareness. It carried a new, deliberate kind of power. In that moment, your emotions didn't control you. You controlled them, not through repression, but through recognition. You saw the situation for what it was, not a battlefield, but a mirror. There was nothing to win there, nothing to prove, nothing worth spilling your energy on. And when you stepped back instead of stepping in, the tribunal noted the shift in your pattern. This is the silence that comes from growth, not surrender. The silence of someone who no longer needs chaos to validate their strength. The silence of someone who knows that every reaction is an investment and no longer spends themselves recklessly. This was one of the clearest indicators the tribunal has witnessed, that your emotional ecosystem is reorganizing itself. You are responding from a higher vantage point, not from old wounds. That kind of silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. And finally, the stare of a stranger. You felt it, didn't you? That moment when someone's eyes lingered too long, as if they were scanning something beneath your surface. That was not an ordinary person passing by. That was an examiner in human form, a sentinel of the tribunal. They weren't judging your clothes, your expression, or your posture. They were studying the alignment between your intention and your action, the way your energy moved, the way your presence felt. They were checking for consistency, because a person can speak beautifully and still carry hidden corrosion. A person can act generously while nursing unspoken resentment. A person can appear calm while their motives twist inward like wires. The stranger's stare was meant to pierce through all of that, to read the truth of your energy, not the performance of your behavior. They wanted to see if your outward actions matched the internal direction of your spirit, whether you are becoming coherent, integrated, and honest at a level that cannot be faked. They watched how you held yourself. They watched how your eyes shifted. They watched the small, instinctive signals your body gave away before your mind caught up. And in those seconds, they gathered more information about your integrity than hours of conversation could reveal. 3. The pressure network. The exam of how much you can withstand. The pressure network surrounds you like an invisible atmosphere, tightening and loosening with deliberate precision. It does not speak, but it presses. It does not warn, but it weighs. It studies how your spirit behaves when the world leans on you with the weight of something you cannot name. And recently, it has been testing you with an intensity reserved only for those who stand at the edge of a threshold they do not yet realize they're approaching. That heavy emotional weight you felt, the kind that seemed to appear out of nowhere and sit on your chest like a presence, was not a random emotional shift. It was a calibrated force field designed to measure your breaking point. The pressure network studies the moment your internal walls start to crack, not to destroy you, but to observe what you do in the silence between impact and collapse. It tracks the tremor in your breath, the shift in your posture, the tightening behind your eyes. It watches the way you move when your heart feels heavier than your bones. This exam is not about whether you break. It is about how close you get to breaking before something deeper in you rises to hold the line. There were days recently when you felt like your emotions were made of wet sand, heavy, dragging, impossible to lift. Your mind kept trying to push forward, but something under the surface kept pulling you back. This weight was not punishment. It was the network pressing down to read your fault lines. Every person has them. Invisible cracks formed from old wounds, old fears, old patterns, but only a few ever face pressure intense enough to expose them. When you felt that heaviness, the network was studying how your spirit behaves when you can no longer outrun your inner gravity. And then there was the exhaustion, not the kind sleep can fix, but the deep, bone-level fatigue that makes you feel emptied out from the inside. You wondered why you were so tired, why simple tasks felt like climbing uphill in thick air. But that exhaustion was not mere stress. It was the network temporarily draining your energetic reserves to examine your reconstruction process. Anyone can perform well when rested. Anyone can speak with clarity when steady. But the network is interested in how you respond when you have nothing left to draw from. It watches the way you rebuild yourself in those moments, not with motivation, not with inspiration, but with instinct, that quiet, stubborn pulse inside you that refuses to disappear even when everything in you feels depleted. It studies the flicker of your determination when your body wants to collapse. It measures the small, almost invisible decisions you make when your inner world feels like it's holding on by a frayed thread. These moments reveal your spiritual architecture, the structure beneath your strength, the true shape of your resilience. Then came the almost successes, the close calls that slipped through your fingers right when you thought you finally had a breakthrough. Opportunities that shimmered in front of you, bright and promising, only to vanish at the final moment. These weren't coincidences or cruel twists. They were precision-engineered tests designed to expose your relationship with pressure, patience, and timing. The network wanted to see how you react when the finish line moves, when victory brushes your fingertips and then pulls away like a tide. Would impatience rush to the surface and take control? Would frustration cloud your judgment? Would resentment grab hold of your heart? Or would clarity keep you steady, refusing to let your emotions rewrite the truth of the situation? These almost successes were never meant to break you. They were meant to reveal what lives inside you when you're forced to wait longer than you want to, work harder than expected, or face the unsettling question, why not now? The network doesn't watch your actions in those moments. It watches your alignment. It observes whether your inner compass stays centered or spins under pressure. There was also that stretch of restless nights, the kind where sleep hovered just out of reach and your mind became louder than your surroundings. These nights weren't random disruptions. They were deliberate activations, stirring the old emotional echoes buried deep in your memory. The network needed to see what happens when you are left alone with the parts of yourself you try hardest to silence. Restlessness shakes loose the thoughts you don't want to face. It brings old fears to the surface, whispers past disappointments back into your mind, and replays unresolved moments like scenes from a film you didn't choose to watch. The network wasn't testing your ability to sleep. It was examining your vulnerability. It wanted to see whether those old echoes still have power, whether they can still influence your decisions, distort your vision, or weaken your resolve. During those nights, the network monitored the subtle shifts in your inner world, the way your thoughts spiraled or steadied, the way your emotions rose or quieted, the way your breathing changed as you navigated memories that resurfaced like ghosts demanding recognition. Every reaction became data, every moment of stillness a revelation, every surge of emotion a signal, and even your body told the story. The network noticed the tension you carried, the tightness in your shoulders, the pressure behind your ribs, the stiffness in your jaw. Your body responds to spiritual tests long before the mind interprets them. The network studies these physical signals because they reveal truth unfiltered by logic or self-explanation. Your body tenses in the places you are growing. It tightens where you are resisting change. It constricts where old patterns are dying. Each knot, each ache, each heaviness is a map of your transition. This tension shows how close you are to outgrowing the level you've been living in. Growth always leaves marks on the body before it appears anywhere else. The network sees your restlessness, your pressure, your emotional storms as signs of transformation, not instability. It reads your body the way one reads seismic data, tracking the quakes, sensing the build-up, noting the shifting plates beneath your identity. 4. The Watchtower of Shadows. The exam of your strategy and awareness. The Watchtower of Shadows observes you from the edges of your life, studying the movements you make when no one explains what the situation truly is. It does not interfere. It does not speak. It simply watches. You never see the watchtower, but you notice its presence in the strange timing of certain events, the way certain people appear and disappear, and the sudden shifts in your emotional atmosphere. Its purpose is not to test your strength. That is the work of other forces. The Watchtower evaluates something more delicate, more revealing: the sharpness of your mind, the precision of your awareness, the strategy in your choices. It wants to know how you navigate shadows when nothing is illuminated for you. The betrayal you recently experienced did not slip past the Watchtower unnoticed. It was permitted, not by the person who carried it out, but by the unseen system that monitors your judgment. The betrayal wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to observe which part of you would rise first in the moment of impact. Would instinct lash out? Would anger flood your decisions? Or would wisdom step forward and guide your response through the darkness? The Watchtower recorded everything: the flicker in your expression when the truth hit, the heat under your skin, the swirl of thoughts that collided in your chest, the stillness that followed. It took note of what you saw immediately and what you missed. It studied whether you reacted to the person or the pattern behind the person, whether you confronted the betrayal directly or examined the deeper fault line that made the betrayal possible. That moment revealed your strategic mind more clearly than any plan you could speak aloud. The Watchtower has no interest in punishment. It is interested in accuracy. Betrayal is simply one of the sharpest tools available to test whether you can navigate deception without losing your center. Most people crumble into emotion or self-blame. But you, chosen one, showed something different. Not perfection, but awareness, rising like a blade through the fog. Then came the gut alerts, those strange, quiet signals that made your stomach tighten or your mind pause without explanation. These were not random sensations. They were tiny flashes sent to test how finely tuned your internal radar has become. The Watchtower wanted to see if you could read the warning before logic arrived. It wanted to see whether you would trust the soft whisper inside you more than the loud noise outside you. Every time you felt that subtle pull, the one that made you stop for half a second, the one that made you question someone's tone or reconsider a choice, the Watchtower observed your reaction. Did you ignore it? Did you overthink it? Did you listen too late? Or did you recognize that your spirit was trying to speak in a language older than thought? These gut alerts were like flashes of light from a distant signal tower, barely strong enough to reach you, but clear enough for someone with your sensitivity to detect. They were meant to check how far your awareness extends, whether you notice shifts in energy, whether you sense when something is off, even before the evidence appears. These moments show whether you are learning to navigate life with instinct, insight, and subtle perception. The tools of someone who moves through shadows with precision. What seemed like a small inconvenience, a delay, a cancelled plan, a sudden change that irritated you more than it should have, was actually a crossroads disguised in ordinary clothing. The Watchtower often hides its sharpest tests inside mundane moments, because how you act when something feels insignificant reveals more truth than how you act in crises. Crises wake up everyone. Small inconveniences expose the deeper wiring of your awareness. When the inconvenience happened, the Watchtower watched your next thought closely. Did you rush? Did you get careless? Did you assume it meant nothing? Or did you sense there was a shift, a subtle redirection happening beneath the surface? Crossroads do not always announce themselves. Sometimes they appear as a blocked path or an unexpected pause. The Watchtower wanted to see how you interpret detours, whether you remain blind to them or recognize them as signals pointing to unseen options. And then the invitation, the offer you received, the message you got, the opportunity or connection that appeared suddenly in your life. Whether you accepted it or rejected it, your choice activated a precise shift in your timeline. Invitations are never just invitations under the Watchtower's gaze. They are triggers. The Watchtower wasn't focused on the person who extended the invitation. It was reading what your response revealed about your readiness, your curiosity, your caution, or your courage. When you said yes, the Watchtower observed what part of you that yes came from. When you said no, it studied the energy behind the refusal. Did you act from openness or avoidance, from intuition or fear, from growth or protection? This invitation was a hinge, a turning point, not because of the event itself, but because of what your choice awakened inside you. The Watchtower recorded the shift in your internal landscape the moment you decided. It watched how your emotions responded. It observed the ripple in your energy. It measured the alignment or tension in your spirit. Your response revealed the direction you were leaning toward without even realizing it. Even your hesitation told a story. The Watchtower pays close attention to the seconds you pause before acting, because hesitation carries more information than action itself. Action can be faked, but hesitation cannot. Hesitation reveals your internal process, the tug-of-war between confidence and doubt, between fear and discernment, between impulse and clarity. The Watchtower studied the quality of your hesitation. Was it the hesitation of fear, tightening your breath and shrinking your chest? Or was it the hesitation of discernment, expanding your awareness while you scan the situation more deeply? Did your hesitation come from uncertainty or wisdom? Did you pause because something felt wrong or because something felt too important to rush? Hesitation is a map of your inner strategy. It shows how you weigh your options, how you interpret signals, how you move through unknown territory. Your hesitation recently revealed the orientation of your decision-making. It showed whether you step forward because you're running from something behind you, or because you're truly drawn to what's ahead. 5. The Chamber of Ancestral Echoes. The exam of what you inherited. The Chamber of Ancestral Echoes does not open with lights or ritual. It opens quietly, almost secretly, in the middle of your ordinary life. You don't feel a door swing wide. You feel something reach backward through your memory, tugging on threads older than your own lifetime. This chamber studies one thing: the inheritance living inside you. Not money, not skills, not physical features, but the emotional codes, wounds, instincts, and strengths passed down through generations. When the chamber activates, the past begins to move around you like a ghost, waking up and stretching its limbs. That's why a recent conflict felt strangely familiar, almost like déjà vu, but heavier, deeper. It wasn't a simple disagreement. It was an echo, a repetition, a scene replayed from your bloodline's history. It rose not because the moment was dramatic, but because it was precise, a mirror of something your ancestors faced but never resolved. The chamber brought it forward to see what you would do in the same position. Would you react as they did, repeating the pattern? Would you break under the same pressure point? Would you fall into the same emotional trap? Or would you choose differently, ending a cycle that lived in your lineage long before you were born? This conflict didn't feel new because it wasn't new. It carried the emotional signature, the energetic scent of your ancestry. The chamber watched how your face changed in the moment, how your voice tightened or steadied, how your spirit responded. It wasn't judging your behavior. It was studying your inheritance. It was watching to see whether the old wound still owns your reactions or whether you've grown beyond it, becoming the piece of the family line that finally breaks the loop. That repeating name, phrase, or symbol that kept appearing around you was not coincidence. It was your ancestry signaling that the chamber had begun its evaluation. These signs show up the way a lighthouse sends flashes across the water, not constant, but rhythmic, just enough to guide. The symbol may have shown up in conversations, in dreams, in media, or in your thoughts, out of nowhere. It wasn't random. It was a recognition signal, a way for your lineage, the ones who walked before you, to mark the moment when the old story began to stir again. Your ancestors have no voice in this realm, so they communicate through repetition. They use symbols that carry meaning, names with history, phrases that resonate deeper than logic. These signs aren't meant to overwhelm you. They're meant to confirm that the test unfolding in your life right now is connected to something older, something threaded into your family's spiritual DNA. The chamber watches how you respond to these symbols, whether you shrug them off or sense their weight, whether you ignore them or recognize their purpose. Then there was that sudden burst of anger, the kind that rose in you like fire, igniting without warning. It happened in response to an injustice, something that struck you as deeply wrong, even if others didn't react as strongly. That anger was not random emotional volatility. It was your ancestry's old strength reawakening inside you. It was the warrior in your blood, the protector, the challenger, the one who refuses to remain silent in the face of wrongdoing. This kind of anger is not destructive. It is ancestral memory, a surge of inherited power. The chamber watched that moment intently. It wasn't measuring your temper, it was measuring your legacy. It wanted to see whether the strength your ancestors possessed, the strength they may have lost, suppressed, or misdirected, has found alignment in you. When that anger rose, the chamber observed how you carried it, whether it sharpened your clarity or clouded your judgment, whether it awakened purpose or triggered chaos. This anger is an inheritance, and the chamber needed to know how it manifests through you. You might have noticed a family member acting strangely toward you, maybe distant, confused, tense, or overly reactive. They weren't consciously aware of it, but they sensed the activation of the chamber around you. They felt something shifting in your energy, something old rising or unraveling. People who share your bloodline can sense when the ancestral field is stirring. They may not understand what is happening, but they feel it as discomfort, curiosity, or even sudden defensiveness. The chamber took note of their reaction, but it was watching you. It watched the way you responded to this shift, whether you absorbed their confusion, whether you mirrored their discomfort, or whether you stayed anchored in your own emotional ground. A family member's behavior becomes part of the exam, because family is where most ancestral patterns hide. The chamber observes how their energy impacts you and how your energy impacts them. Every glance, every silence, every subtle tension becomes data. And then the childhood fear, the one you thought you outgrew, the one you believed you left behind years ago. It returned not to torment you, but to test you. The chamber brought it back intentionally, almost surgically, to reveal whether the old cycle still has a grip on your inner world. Childhood fears are portals. They reveal the original fracture points where ancestral wounds first touched you. They show where the pattern entered your psyche long before you had the language to understand it. The return of that fear was a psychological echo. It allowed the chamber to observe whether the old wound still shapes your decisions, whether it still hides in the corners of your mind, or whether you have matured beyond the version of yourself who once trembled before it. When that fear resurfaced, the chamber watched your breath, your posture, your thoughts, the way your eyes shifted. It measured how much power the fear still holds. It wanted to see whether you collapse into it or stand above it. That fear was the final key, the deepest thread, the original imprint of the ancestral cycle. 6. The Citadel of Trust. The exam of who deserves to stand beside you. The Citadel of Trust is not an airy, hopeful place. It is a fortress, tall, silent, and unmovable, designed to test one thing with absolute precision: who gets access to you. Every tower, every corridor, every gate inside this citadel studies the people around you with the same seriousness as a guard evaluating threats at the border. And whether you realize it or not, your life has recently turned into an examination of loyalty, motive, and emotional clarity. The tests came quietly, disguised as ordinary interactions, but each one carried the weight of a hidden evaluation, measuring who deserves to stand beside you as you rise. This is why someone suddenly reappeared in your life, not gradually, not gently, but abruptly, as if the universe opened a door you weren't expecting. They didn't just show up, they were placed. Their timing was intentional, engineered to see whether you would respond with emotion or with insight. The Citadel watched whether you mistook familiarity for safety, whether you confused shared history with trustworthy intention. This return wasn't about them at all. It was about you. It was about the reflex inside you that reaches for the comfort of what you know, even when what you know has unfinished shadows. The Citadel studied your reaction, the warmth you felt, the hesitation you tried to hide, the quiet questions forming in your mind. It observed whether you would interpret their presence as a sign, a warning, or just a memory knocking on the door. And above all, it watched to see if you could tell the difference between genuine connection and a recycled pattern disguised as fate. Then came the moment of unexpected kindness, that soft, surprising gesture that warmed you enough to lower your guard just an inch. It didn't matter who it came from, a stranger, a friend, someone on the edge of your life. The kindness itself was not the test. The test was your response to it. The Citadel wanted to see whether gratitude would blur the sharpness of your intuition, whether you would excuse red flags simply because someone offered you a moment of warmth. Kindness can be pure, but it can also be strategic. It can be a mask, a bargain, a distraction. The Citadel examined how quickly you softened, how deeply you accepted the gesture, and whether you allowed yourself to forget the patterns that led you to be cautious in the first place. It watched whether your heart would override your instincts, or whether your instincts would remain steady even when your heart was touched. Then the tension rose, slowly at first, then suddenly, like pressure building behind a sealed door. You felt it in a relationship where you normally feel balanced. The shift didn't come from nowhere. It came from a small loyalty distortion, a subtle misalignment introduced to reveal where your loyalty truly rests. The Citadel needed to see who you protect when things get uncomfortable. It needed to see whether you choose peace over truth or truth over comfort. It watched how your voice changed in the tension, how your body tightened, how your mind tried to make sense of the sudden imbalance. Loyalty is not proven when everything is smooth. It is proven when the ground tilts. And this tilt was designed specifically to show whether your loyalty comes from guilt, habit, obligation, or genuine connection. Then there was the argument, the one that escalated too quickly, almost unnaturally. Words sharpened, emotions spiked, misunderstandings multiplied. It felt as though the whole moment sped up beyond your control. That acceleration wasn't accidental. It was engineered to expose cracks that needed to be seen. The Citadel did not create the cracks. It simply increased the pressure so you could no longer pretend they weren't there. Arguments like this reveal hidden resentment, unspoken fears, buried expectations. They expose mismatched communication styles, mismatched loyalty, mismatched intentions. As the argument intensified, the Citadel watched what surfaced. The truth that slips out when tempers rise, the confession hidden inside frustration, the emotion that betrays what someone really feels. And it watched you too, how you stood your ground or backed away, how you handled the heat, how you chose your words. The speed of the escalation was used to reveal what slow conversations would never uncover. And finally, the suspicion, the quiet, uneasy feeling you tried to ignore or explain away. Your suspicion wasn't a flaw, and it wasn't paranoia. In the Citadel of Trust, suspicion is a tool, a radar, a signal that you are learning to read people with new clarity. The Citadel tracks how you handle this instinct. Do you shut it down out of guilt? Do you tell yourself you're imagining things? Or do you allow yourself to observe without jumping to conclusions? Suspicion doesn't mean someone is guilty. It means your inner guidance system has noticed something your conscious mind hasn't fully processed yet. The Citadel studies how you respond to these subtle alerts, whether you get reckless with accusations or whether you quietly gather information, whether you panic or whether you stay composed, whether you trust your perception or betray it. Every piece of this test, the returning person, the unexpected kindness, the rising tension, the sudden argument, the quiet suspicion, was placed with precision. Nothing chaotic, nothing random. The Citadel of Trust has been watching how you sort the people around you, who you allow close, who you keep at a distance, who you forgive, who you question, and who you pretend you don't see clearly because it's easier than admitting the truth. 7. The furnace of identity, the exam of who you are. Becoming. The furnace of identity is the most intense chamber you've stepped into because it doesn't test anything outside of you. It tests you against your own former self. In this place, nothing superficial survives. Nothing borrowed, nothing performed, nothing inherited. The furnace burns only what is no longer true, and it does so by pushing you into moments that feel unbearable, moments that stretch your inner world until something inside you snaps, not out of weakness, but out of transformation. That moment when you emotionally broke, the one you didn't see coming, the one that pulled tears or silence out of you with no warning. That was the ignition point, the strike of the match. It wasn't random collapse, it was combustion. The outdated version of you could no longer carry the weight of your new identity, so it cracked under the pressure. The furnace studies that breaking point with cold precision. It watched how your breath shook, how your thoughts spiraled, how the old defenses failed to protect you the way they once did. That emotional break wasn't meant to shame you. It was designed to expose the parts of you that could not enter the next phase. It was the moment the old shell split open so the new form beneath it could finally be seen. The breaking wasn't a failure. It was the sound of something ancient inside you deciding it was time to evolve. Then came the urge to isolate, that deep, heavy pull inward, as if the world suddenly became too loud, too crowded, too demanding. The furnace examines isolation differently from how humans interpret it. Humans call it loneliness, sadness, or depression. But the furnace calls it reconstruction. When the old identity burns away, you are not meant to be surrounded by noise. You are pulled into yourself, into the quiet, so the new structure can start forming without interference. The urge to isolate is the instinct to gather your pieces, to protect your inner rebuilding, to shut out any voices that would try to glue your old identity back together. The furnace watched how you moved during this isolation, whether you hid from yourself or confronted yourself, whether you ran from your own reflection or sat with it long enough to feel the new shape forming beneath the ashes. Then something strange happened. Your old goals began to lose their shine. Things you once wanted, chased, or obsessed over suddenly felt flat, empty, or irrelevant. That wasn't laziness, and it wasn't confusion. It was the old version of you shutting down. The goals belonged to who you were, not who you're becoming. The furnace uses this loss of interest to monitor your evolution. When your desires change, it knows your identity is shifting. It watched the moment you realized you no longer felt driven by the same ambitions. It watched the small grief of letting go. It watched the quiet relief of not having to pretend anymore. The old version of you cannot fuel your new path, so its goals begin to dim like dying embers. And the furnace pays attention to how you respond when your old motivations no longer move you. Then came the moment when your confidence disappeared, not permanently, but suddenly, like it slipped out of your hands for a second, and you weren't sure where it went. It might have been during a conversation, a decision, a challenge, or even a simple thought. The furnace created that drop on purpose. It wasn't measuring how strong your confidence was. It was measuring how you rebuild yourself when the ground under your identity momentarily gives way. Confidence that depends on circumstances is fragile. Confidence that can survive a sudden collapse becomes unbreakable. The furnace observed how you gathered yourself in that moment, how you stood up internally even while shaking, how you searched for stability, how you pulled your sense of self back into place. This wasn't about performance. It was about reconstruction under pressure. The furnace wanted to see whether you could assemble yourself with new materials, not the scraps of your old identity. And then someone said it, or implied it, or hinted at it, or watched you with widened eyes as the words formed in their mind before they ever left their mouth. You've changed. The phrase might have come with confusion, admiration, fear, or even accusation. It doesn't matter. Their reaction was the indicator. They weren't commenting on your behavior. They were reacting to your transformation. The old layers of your identity are falling away faster than the people around you can track. Some see it as growth. Others see it as threat. But the furnace saw their reaction for what it truly was: confirmation. When someone notices your change before you fully recognize it yourself, it means the transformation is already visible on the outside. Your presence shifts, your energy rearranges, your boundaries tighten, your voice deepens, and the old version of you becomes harder for others to access. The furnace studies how you respond when others cannot keep up with your metamorphosis. Do you shrink to make them comfortable? Do you defend your shift? Do you pretend nothing is different? Or do you stand in the new shape, even if you don't fully understand it yet? Each of these moments, the emotional breaking, the isolation, the fading goals, the lost confidence, the comments about your change, has been part of a controlled burn, a precise sequence designed to melt the old identity so the new one can take form. The furnace doesn't test your strength. It tests your evolution. It doesn't care if you scream, if you tremble, if you doubt yourself. It cares about one thing only: what is left standing after the fire moves through you. Final segment: the corridor of final checks. The corridor of final checks is the last stretch before everything in your life shifts. It is narrow, quiet, and charged with a kind of spiritual electricity that wraps around you like the air right before a storm breaks. In this corridor, Nothing dramatic happens on the outside. The movement is happening inside you, subtle but undeniable, like gears aligning after years of grinding. It is here that the final examinations unfold, not to punish you, but to make sure your identity, your readiness, and your energy match the breakthrough that's waiting on the other side. This is why you felt that sudden calm, the one that came out of nowhere, settling over you like a soft, heavy blanket. It wasn't relief, it wasn't avoidance, it wasn't you giving up. This calm came from deeper than emotion. It was your inner system preparing for a major shift, shutting down unnecessary noise so it could redirect power to the parts of you that must rise next. It was the silence before activation, the hush before alignment. When the corridor saw that calm take over you, it registered your readiness. Stillness is the mark of someone whose spirit is bracing for elevation, not collapse. That quiet was a signal. Your internal world was repositioning itself for the next phase. Then something broke or disappeared. Maybe an object, maybe a plan, maybe a relationship, maybe an opportunity you thought was secure. It wasn't an accident. It was a marker. When something snaps or falls away in the corridor, it means the previous cycle has officially ended. The cycle can't follow you forward. It has to burn out here. The moment it disappeared, the corridor took note. A door closed. A thread was cut. A chapter sealed itself shut. Not because you failed, but because what belonged to the old version of you cannot survive in the reality you're stepping into. The breaking wasn't destruction, it was a boundary. It was the universe removing what had expired so it wouldn't contaminate what's waiting. Then, on a particular day, time felt strange. Maybe the hours dragged. Maybe everything moved too fast. Maybe the day felt like it stretched or folded. Maybe your sense of timing felt off, like you were walking half a second ahead or behind yourself. That distortion wasn't your imagination. It was your path being adjusted with surgical precision. The corridor bent time around you so that events could align correctly. This is the kind of shift you can't force. It happens around you like invisible hands rearranging the gears of destiny. The strangeness you felt was the echo of pathways realigning. Everything was being positioned with exact accuracy so you would arrive at the right moment, not early, not late, but perfectly on time. And that opportunity you've been sensing, the one that's been hovering on the edge of your awareness like a door slightly cracked open, it is real. It's been pulsing quietly in your energy field, calling you, preparing you, waiting for you. But in the corridor, opportunities are locked until the final test is complete. Not withheld, not denied, locked. Waiting for the moment your inner readiness matches what the opportunity requires. The corridor watches how you handle this waiting period, whether you chase after shadows or stand your ground, whether you panic at the delay or hold steady in the unknown. The opportunity is not disappearing. It is simply on the other side of the final calibration. And then there's that tight feeling in your chest, the mix of fear and anticipation that comes without warning. The feeling that something is coming, even if you can't name it. That pressure is not anxiety. It is the sign, the mark, the final indicator that you're standing right at the edge of your breakthrough. The corridor studies that sensation closely because the body always knows before the mind does. That tightness is your system bracing for impact, the impact of change, expansion, and an identity shift so significant that your spirit is preparing itself for the threshold. It's the feeling of standing at the door, hand raised, moments before knocking. It's the final heartbeat before the lock clicks open. In the corridor of final checks, every subtle shift, every strange moment, every flicker of intuition is measured. These aren't random events. They're signals that the border between your old life and your next one is paper thin. You have been walking through these tests not to prove your worth, but to align your identity with the magnitude of what is waiting. The breakthrough is not a distant possibility. It's a closed door inches from your face. And the corridor is watching the final pieces fall into place. Chosen one, you have walked through tests that would have broken others, and yet you stand here, steady, aware, awakened. You carry the weight and the fire of someone who is meant to step into a larger life. Everything around you is shifting because everything within you has already begun to transform. You are not lost. You are not behind. You are rising exactly on schedule. If this message spoke to the truth inside you, like this video, subscribe, and comment, "I am crossing the threshold." Your breakthrough is no longer coming. It's here.